king. You've 90 days. You'll get your music kicking. Your friends will be amazed. It's 50/90. That's why HFO is here. It's 50/90. It's 50/90.
Hello. I have a working microphone. I have a more or less working studio, so that's a bonus, especially compared with last week. Good evening. Welcome to this second of my Head First Only does 50/90 shows. Ryako Music, an array of emotions already in the house. Hello, both of you. It's Sunday, so yes, it's time for another bit of talking about getting set up for doing 50/90 if you've not done it before, or you want to improve the results that you got last time, or you're just a nerd like us. We'll have fun. So, once... Oh, I know what I've done. Excuse me a second. I was playing with special effects. And I'd left the plate reverb on because it sounds wonderful with the synthesizers, so that's why I sounded weird. Microphones, they can trip you up, they can get in the way of the camera. Last week we talked a little bit about different types of microphones, and especially for Ableton, I have the Reslo plugged into the desk. So in an HFO first, I'm going to switch from the SM7B, which is my main microphone these times, to a Reslo RBL that was probably made sometime in the 50s. And I never knew this, but bundle deals were not a new thing, because back in the day, Ferrograph, the reel-to-reel tape recording people, offered a Reslo as a bundle deal when you bought one of their humongous Ferrograph reel-to-reel tape recorders, which was, I think my father had a Ferrograph 4N, which was the size of a small refrigerator, but he must have got one of these in the deal. So I don't know if you can see with the ring light getting in the way, but there's the brand. It's a Reslo RBL, and this is what it sounds like. Yes, it's very hissy, but we can deal with that. So your door or your mixing desk, if you're lucky enough to have one, will have EQ on it, which stands for equalization. What it means is that a microphone's frequency response from the low stuff to the high stuff is not flat, and equalization is a way of boosting some frequencies or cutting others to make it flat, or to give particular emphasis to certain bands of frequencies. So this Mackie desk that I've got has a 3-band EQ on it, and I can basically roll off the top end somewhat and see if that helps. It's a bit better, isn't it? If I boost the mids, do I want a bit of low end roll off to get rid of rumble? So what I've basically done, low end cut, basically gets rid of everything under about 100 hertz. There aren't very many things that you want in your mix that have signal components lower than 150 hertz, because the more things that you have with those frequencies in the mix, the muddier your mix will be. So let's boost it a bit more. Hello. That's not too bad, is it? I mean, it is very hissy, but back in the day, this little bugger was very, very popular. So I actually dug up a few photographs on the internet of the Reslow RBL in use. And as if by magic, the hiss disappears. So, yes, as I mentioned last week, the Reslow RBL was standard equipment in the Cavern Club back in the days when a young band with a drummer called Pete Best used to play there. And next to the Beatles, that's a photograph of Mick Jagger with a 19-year-old Keith Richards in the background, playing a gig in December 1963 and using a Reslow mic. And as you can see, he's got his nose on the damn thing. The frequency response from the things is not good. You need to be on top of it, and we'll cover that in a minute. So, microphones. Yay microphones. I think I'm probably hanging on to this, A, for nostalgia value, but primarily for the looks. It certainly isn't for the performance. So, I said last week I'd talk a bit about microphones in more detail and how to get the best from them. We've covered what they are and what the different types are, but that's not really going to help you get better results. So today's lecture, boys and girls, is about the 4 Ps. These are the 4 things that are going to help you get better results from your microphone use. The 4 Ps are plosives, patterns, placement, and proximity. Yowzers. What do we mean by that? Yeah, a plosive happens every time you make or you say a word with a P or a B in it. A blast of air hits the microphone and the listener hears a loud thump in the audio. Array of Emotions says PowerPoint never does what you want it to. I know it doesn't. That's why I'm not using it. I'm using OpenOffice Impress. But of course I test ran this on the machine downstairs, and I don't know if it's got a different build, but it's certainly got a different monitor set up. And of course I need OBS on monitor 2. So I'll stick with this at the moment if you're cool with that. So yeah, a plosive. It's one of the easiest ways of identifying a newbie microphone user, because you'll hear a loud thump every time they say a word with a P or a B in it. And that's literally a blast of air caused by your mouth forming the letters. You might not hear it particularly loudly, but believe me, the listener will. So how do you fix it? Okay, as it says there, you check the Plosives range with pa, pa, pa. And literally what that means is that you say pa, 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 but you hold your hand in front of your mouth. Pa, 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 pa. So I can't feel me saying pa. when my hand is at about that distance, which means that really if I'm using a microphone, that's how far away I need to be. Anybody seen the King's Speech? Remember when the announcer does his little metal horns thing to judge microphone distance? That's what he's doing. He's making sure that as an official BBC announcer, he does not create plosives. And of course, the old favourite, when all else fails, chuck a piece of netting in front of your microphone to catch the blasts of air. It is literally just nylon mesh, like nylon stockings. And you just clamp the shield in front of your microphone. This being a... Oh, hello, Noir Shire. Thank you very much for joining us. Riako says, I love that music. King's Speech is brilliant. It's interesting. I've just started watching season 1 of The Crown, which has a certain Mr. Harris playing Bertie. And all I can think of is the King's Speech. Even though anybody else can portray the king, it's always going to be the King's Speech. But never mind. Show plosives. Get rid of them. Don't want them. It'll mark you down as a newbie, and everybody will sigh every time your podcast or song clobbers them round the ears with a loud thwack. So that's one of the 4 P's. What's the next one? What is the next one? I've forgotten. Patterns. Right. We're going to have fun here. Not all microphones behave in the same way. I have diagrams. That's how bad this is getting. Previously on the HFO 5090 show, HFO was talking about this legendary microphone, which, if you've ever watched a concert video, odds are the singer and probably all the backing vocalists and everybody else will be using one as well. It's a Shure Sm58. Beloved of mic drops, I noticed after doing a bit of research on YouTube this week. And as you remember last week, if you hold it at about that level, your voice will go away. So it is great for rejecting background noise and feedback. And what sort of pattern can you approach the mic with and be heard or not be heard? Well, the SM58 is something known as a cardioid. So here's my really impressive and high-tech instructional video design illustrations to show you what a cardioid is. Cardioid because it is literally shaped like a heart. That's where it gets its name. It's as sad as that. So you can see, as we mentioned last week, Bono likes cardioid mics, likes the SM58 because he can sing, and you could have a wall of Marshall stacks here, and because of the area where the microphone picks up noise, he can sing and he can hear the Marshall stacks, but the microphone won't. This orientation thing confuses people. So what it means is literally that. That's the area, only obviously much bigger, that the Shure SM58 is good at picking up noises from. So you can stand next to the drum kit and you'll get a bit of bleed. You'll probably get more from the bass player who's standing on your other side, but that's because bass players always turn their volume up to 10 as soon as the gig starts. But it will give you a lovely reception of your vocals. So the SM58 cardioid microphone. In some cases, you might be interviewing somebody and you might be sitting across a desk, for instance, in which case a bidirectional microphone comes in really useful, because it'll pick up you, and if your interviewee sits here, it'll pick them up as well. Meanwhile, all the audio equipment and the producer shouting at you and the audience on the stage somewhere else won't get picked up because they're outside the areas that the mic picks up. So bidirectional mic, really good for interviews, really good for duets. Or you might have a guitarist who is accompanying you, so a bidirectional mic will help you get good results from the guitar and the vocals, but exclude noise from the rest of the room. Cool, eh? Then it gets more complicated. Fooled you. The simplest mic of the lot is omnidirectional. In other words, it doesn't matter where the sound's coming from, an Omni will pick it up. And then a super cardioid still rejects most of the noise from the back of the mic, but it gives better frequency response and a wider pickup range from the front. Microphone designers aren't very good at naming things. You will find that out shortly. Ryako Music says the one on the right is from the toilet POV. I do not wish to know that. Yes, very good. But wait, there's more. We've already had one Ace movie, The King's Speech, mentioned earlier. Here's another one I'm going to throw at you. Early film by Francis Ford Coppola called The Conversation, starring Gene Hackman as a surveillance expert who inadvertently gets drawn into a conspiracy and loses his mind. There is a scene where he thinks he's being bugged and he pulls all the floorboards up in his apartment while playing the saxophone. A scene that was shamelessly ripped off in its entirety in an episode of The X-Files. Tribute? Nah, plagiarism. Gene Hackman's character is basically recording a conversation from a very, 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 very long way away. And he is using, he uses a shotgun mic, which is basically a very long pointy microphone that is specially built to pick up sounds from a very, very narrow angle and a long, long way away. And then, yes, it's another cardioid mic. It's the hypercardioid mic. Same deal as before, only it's got slightly better at picking up stuff behind it. And again, this time it's more a sort of mushroom-shaped field of listening. So that's 90 degrees either side of the mic. That's in front, that's behind. So it does pick up stuff here, but anything here or here, forget it. And that can be a good thing, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But wait, there's more. Because the cardioid people wouldn't let it lie just with hypercardioid. Any guesses, anybody? Anybody in chat want to suggest what the next cardioid would be? That'd be even more cardioid than the hypercardioid. Array of Emotions says mega. Ryako Music says super or mega. I haven't come across a mega cardioid. We've done the super cardioid already. No, what we have is the ultra cardioid, which has a very, very weird sensitivity field. Basically straight lines out left and right. Straight line out the back, almost like a shotgun mic. And a wider field of view at the front. And I've just trodden on my microphone lead. Noirjaya says, I wouldn't know the difference if it beat me senseless. An Array of Emotion says, they took their naming from the Unreal Tournament kill streak announcements. Mel says, coffee drip into a bottle. Oh, I wish. That sounds like a good idea right now. I've been DIYing all day. So that concludes our tour through the many different types of pickup patterns for microphones. Wasn't that fun? And patterns are important because of placement, because you want to make sure that the microphone is pointing at you, i.e. the fancy microphone has an inevitable logo on it, and you want to stand in front of it so that the logo is visible to you. Otherwise, you will be standing in the area that rejects the noise, and that's not good. You also want to position the microphone so that the dip in the pattern points it away from any irritating sources of noise in the studio. The photograph of Lady Gaga there is submitted without comment. I actually like her stuff. I've got several of her albums. Right, enough of placement. The last one is proximity. Proximity effect. Basically, the distance you are from a microphone changes how it sounds, or changes how you sound through it. So if I move back a bit, to about here, you can still hear me all right, and it's a fairly average sort of voice sound because I've got a fairly average sort of voice. But if I move in very close to the microphone or move the mic in very close to me, you notice that suddenly there's a lot more in the low mids and even the low frequencies. And that's known as proximity effect, because the amount of air that's hitting the microphone is actually a lot more. It's a sort of reverse of moving back to stop plosives. It actually enables the microphone to completely pick up all the energy that's coming out of your mouth in your voice. And I guess none of you guys... do you guys ever remember Midnight Caller, Gary Cole? No? Well, be like Gary, because you can see he's got I think that's a Newman mic. I would think it would be a Newman mic because it's studio, it's LA, it's showbiz. Gary Cole played a talk radio DJ before there was such a thing as talk radio, who solved crimes, and that was a TV series. And look how close he is to the mic. So yeah, experiment with your mic. See if moving in really close changes the sound. Or try moving further back and see if that changes the sound. If you're lucky enough to have more than one mic, compare them at different distances from your mouth and see which one works for you. But always be like Gary Cole. Ryako Music says, "Oh, can you show us how you hold your mics?" Never hold them. I always use a mic stand because the amount of mechanical noise that holding a mic introduces, certainly when I'm doing it, really screws up the take. Mel says, what if you're recording live? These days, everybody seems to be moving towards the little headset mics with the little stick mic on them. I picked up one of these years ago. So I've got this. I mean, it's a gaming headset. It's basically just a pair of Sennheiser microphones with a boom mic on them. So you can see. And I've got friends who perform at the Hammersmith Odeon and do stadium tours and talk about physics and take the piss out of each other, and they use the little, flesh-coloured boom mics. I've been nerding, and I just kicked it over, which is why it decided to play the end credits music. This is basically what I used. This is what I used to control Ableton before Ableton partnered with Akai to create the push. And it's normal use is to control sessions and everything in Ableton. But I'm a nerd, and I decided that I could put it to better use. Yep, I can control camera scenes by pushing buttons on my Launchpad. This is the object that made Bill go whoa when we did the jam in Vancouver for Louis' birthday many years ago, and making the author of Johnny Mnemonic go whoa when he sees a bit of technology has been one of the high points of my musical career, I think. But if I push different buttons, it lets me select my camera angles, and if I push down here when I'm not streaming, I can even start and stop recordings. Literally, you map the MIDI signals that this thing outputs MIDI signals that are effectively notes. And I've got a tiny little piece of software called MIDI Key to Key, which lets you change those MIDI note signals into hotkey combinations, which I then plug into OBS. So yeah, providing you don't kick it over and start playing the end credits so that everybody thinks you've gone home, I am home. It's a very useful piece of kit. It will also come in useful in a couple of weeks, because on the 25th of July, I found out this week, I'm going to be using the synthesizers in here, streaming as the opening act in an online electronic music event called VEMS 2.0. So hopefully I will have more information about that next week, so stay tuned. Noah says, I keep giggling like a schoolgirl every time you do something. The neighbours think I'm crazy. Well, I definitely am. I think any neighbour of mine that discovers that I have a full Marshall stack just in the room backs away and finds somebody else to talk to at parties. But never mind. Yes, one of the questions talking about synthesizers that music songwriter on 5090 said, thoughts on different keyboards? Oh, blimey. No, I know Nadia is very much an 88 key full on piano type person, which is why, if I switch to the Zoom Q8, which is why this beast would really hit the spot, because it's a fully weighted 88 key piano keyboard with aftertouch and pressure, but it is a sledgehammer to crack a nut. It's a Korg M3, which has been superseded these days by things like the Korg Triton and the Korg Kronos. They are not cheap. Well, I mean, all those synthesizers in that stack are ancient. The Korg is the youngest at about 12 years old. I bought it back 10 years ago. Above that is a Juno 60 from 81, 2-ish. Above that, the Juno 60's later iteration, the Juno 106. And right at the top, the first polysynth I ever bought, and the only one of those synthesizers, other than the M3, that I bought from new, is the JX3P. I still get a buzz from playing it, and I bought that in 1982. Really, if you're looking to get a keyboard, a number of different questions to ask yourself. One, do you want something that makes noises on its own? Now, all of those do. They're synthesizers or music workstations in the case of the M3, which means that I don't need a band. All I need to do, and in fact a lot of my early stuff on 5090 was done just on the M3. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, it has an auto accompaniment that can basically add 4 different instruments to whatever I'm playing. So that might be drums, or drums and bass. And Nora says, your keyboards came haunted. Oh, that'd be fun, wouldn't it? Certainly the Juno 60 has some stories to tell, I am sure. It does some very weird things when it thinks I'm not looking. Yeah, the M3, if you want to go high end and basically have something that does the lot, the M3, something like the Korg Triton or its equivalent, the Roland Phantom, there's a Yamaha, I think it's the MWS music workstation. They're all pretty much of a muchness in that they're stuffed to the gunnels with all sorts of synthesizer add-ons, and they allow you to basically play along to yourself. And instead of waffling, why don't I just show you? And suddenly you look up and it's 2 hours later. So that so the haunted keyboards thread is continuing. Mel says the whole setup looks amazing. Your keyboards come haunted. Noir says I had to find something to haunt mine. Mel says Casper the musical ghost. It reminds me of the I Love Willie's song from the IT crowd. And Noir says VMV Nation. I can be absolutely anything. They're addictive, but getting something like that is very expensive. These days, if you're using a DAW to make your music, you don't need anything like that. All you need is a MIDI keyboard. Offload all the processing and creation of sounds and MIDI jiggery pokery into your DAW's PC, MacBook Air, or whatever else you happen to be playing, and let the PC do all the work. In which case, yeah, I'm becoming a bit of a Native Instruments fat boy, and they're kind of not where they need to be at the moment. I know they were talking about layoffs a couple of months back, so I'm trying to support them as much as possible, which is one reason why I went down the complete Audio 6 mark route. But another is it kicks major ass compared with the Focusrite. And Mel says some killer VSTs. I downloaded, I kid you not, 4.5 gigs of stuff that came with the audio interface, courtesy of Native Instruments. And Native Instruments Native Access desktop application just knew what I was entitled to and installed it for me, because all I did was type the serial number of the unit into Native Access and it did the rest. Gone are the days of having to type in keyboard codes and fill out captures to get software updates. Now it just goes, oh, you've got this free DJ software, do you want to try it out? So yeah, why not? Okay. Mel says, oh no, what's going on? Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with them, but they laid off quite a large percentage of their workforce a couple of months ago. So Native Instruments, I love you. Please stay around and please continue to make awesome stuff. And the awesome stuff that I think Music Songwriter would be interested in is the latest Native Instruments control keyboard, which is 88 keys. I'm going to again talk about him because I love the stuff he does. And that's Guy Mitchellmore, who runs ThinkSpace, which is the online musical education operation, and the ThinkSpace YouTube channel. About 2 weeks ago, Guy decided he needed a new composer keyboard. He's a film composer for television and film by profession, and his old MIDI controller keyboard, 88 keys, nice layout, everything else, was getting a bit long in the tooth, so he bought the high-end Native Instruments 88 key keyboard. I can't remember what it's called, but do watch the video on YouTube, because there is a man getting very excited about a very, very shiny, very, very swish piece of kit. And Mel says, ooh, I want that. That was exactly the reaction I had, because when he discovered that above each of the black and white notes on the keyboard, there was a little LED that lit up blue to tell you that it had lit up. Yeah. Excitement knew no bounds. It's a kick-ass piece of kit, and it integrates with your DAW. It's got a display on it and controllers, so you can basically run your DAW from your keyboard. Bit like the Push, really. If I start live, because my Push is currently saying, well, you haven't started live. In terms of playing keyboards, the Push is a bit niche, because it organises notes in a very peculiar way, and if you're a piano player, it will confuse the hell out of you unless you're somebody like Jordan Rudess. I love odd musical instruments and oh, of course. Sorry, if I just switch to my screen one, you can see what's happened. I've downloaded over 4.5 gigabytes of software, and they're all VSTs, and they all integrate into Ableton. So Ableton's now saying, oh, you've got 4.5 gigabytes more VSTs than you had the last time I ran. And it's like, oh, here we go. So, right. So now we have a live set. So what I'm going to do is drop an instrument, and I'm just going to use one of Ableton's internal. So no additional software required. This just comes with Ableton. So what we'll have a drift. Oh, that's nice. In fact, I think I've used that on several of my albums. It's called Drifting Ambient Pad. So we'll drop that onto a track in Ableton. And then if you look, I've now got, in fact, let's go main on this. So I can now pick what key I want to play in. So if I want to play in D Phrygian, I just select it, and then the only notes that it shows me are the notes in the D Phrygian mode. So I can say, yeah, I wrote this in D Phrygian, it's really cool and everything. It's not cool at all. It's just me mashing buttons until I go, oh, that sounds good. So this is a D Phrygian mode. So, I mean, I've been playing this for a long time now. In fact, the Push Mark 1 is obsolete because there's now a very shiny Push Mark 2 that does a lot of stuff that would be really useful. And Mel and David might remember from a few episodes back on my Thursday night stuff that I was enthusing about the Spitfire Audio BBC Symphony Orchestra plugin. And I said at the time, oh yeah, what I really need to do is configure the controllers on the Push so that I can control the expression and the dynamics, which are these two sliders here, which really turn a pretty good sounding software sample synth into something that sounds very, very much like a full orchestra. Of course, I said that without actually having checked out what the Push does when you enable BBC Symphony Orchestra. And lo and behold, if I switch back to instrument, they're already in there at the top. So I just twiddle the knob as I'm playing. How cool is that? But I reckon if you're in the market for a good controller keyboard, that Native Instruments keyboard looks absolutely incredible. It ain't going to be cheap, but it's certainly going to be cheaper than something in the Korg or the Tritons League. There are really, really tiny 25 key MIDI keyboards that you just plug into your PC through USB that basically would let me do the same thing as I would do on the Push, but with just a straightforward piano keyboard. And a quick shufty through Amazon a couple of days ago, I mean, there are Chinese ones that are going on Amazon for like 35 quid. I can't vouch for the quality, but you can get 25 key MIDI bare bones keyboards. I think Akai do one that actually has the same sort of controller pads that I've got on the Korg. There are a number of 49 key MIDI interfaces that will drive your synth on your DAW. There are 61 key interfaces, which all the synths behind me, apart from the Korg, are 61 key synths. That seemed to have been the standard back in the day. But yeah, if I didn't have the Korg these days, I probably wouldn't go for a Composer workstation. I'd just get something like the Native Instruments keyboard controller and just let the software do everything. And there is some great software out there. So if I go back to Ableton, we'll get rid of the BBC Symphony Orchestra for the moment. So bye bye Spitfire, and instead we'll go to one of my other favourite toys, which is Artorias Analog Lab, which is it's Artorias V collection. So there are a number of absolutely iconic synthesizers that I wanted as a synthesizer nerd, and I couldn't afford them then, and I certainly couldn't afford them now with the prices that they're going for. The Mel says, I have a mini Akai one for travelling. Yeah, they're really cool. So basically, what have we got here? Let's go through the synths. So that is the Arturia Mini. So it's an emulation. All of these are emulations of particular famous iconic synthesizers. So this is the menu that you get of all the different synthesizers. So each one of these buttons in this matrix is a classic synthesizer. So they've given you a nice emulation user interface. I mean, these are preset sounds. Just going through these, there are so many good ones. But all these knobs, if I twiddle them with the mouse, they will actually affect the sound. Lovely 80s analog synth with the Prophet 5. Outright batshit crazy West Coast minimalist bonkersness with the Buchla easel. So all I need to do is hold a note down. Madness. Mel says turn it up. I'm going to keep it down low because some of the other presets are a bit on the loud side. What else have we got here? So again, ridiculous amounts of. So this preset's called Another Take on Fail. $30,000 ARPs. So arpeggios, anyone? And that reverb is being added by the preset. So it's actually built into the damn thing with this control here. Oh. Ryako Music says, I'm down for buzzy arps. It's the only type worth bothering about. Here's one called 2 Hyperspeed. Basically, if you want buzzy arps, the Buchla easel is the synth for you. Buchlas are not cheap. It's Louis and B. Barron Forbidden Planet soundtrack type stuff, isn't it? I think you're probably beginning to detect a sort of trend in the sort of sounds that the Buchla is good at doing. I like that. I think I could probably use that for something. I'm going to, because I'm a great believer in serendipity, I'm going to save this live set and I'm going to make something of this as my next 5090 track. Ryako Music says, waste not, want not. Exactly, you know, all about using what you've got to the maximum effect. Array of Emotion says, how is 5090 going for you? Yes. Anyway, I've been, hang on, let's go back to the main web. I've been really busy. I've got 4 down, so I think I'm probably about 1 behind where I should be at the moment. But this is mainly because I have been DIYing in here for the last week and a half. So although this all looks very nice now, what you can't see is what's on the floor or what's actually holding the camera up. You can kind of see those shelves there. They weren't there before. And there was also a lot of crap on the floor. So if I move out the way, that's my Roland guitar synthesizer, a whole bunch of pedals. The floor hasn't been this tidy in here since I moved. Array of Emotion says, I saw the photos on Instagram. Yeah, I'm kind of knackered. I've been doing DIY. I've done more DIY. Noah says, string and duct tape. You betcha. Always have duct tape within arm's reach. Yeah, most of my stuff is held together with duct tape. I wish I could be held together with duct tape. I'd probably be in better shape than I am. But yeah, I don't know. I just suddenly got the urge, or just irritated enough to. It's like, well, sod it. You know, I had a stack of these little pedal interconnects. I've got boxes of the damn things. Shush. Ryako Music says, I remember the messy version. Yeah, well, you would be in shock if you saw what it's like in here now. You wouldn't recognize the place. Yeah, today, most of these, the sort of black, hang on, let's put it on that, then you can see what it actually is. It's a right angle connector 1/4-inch jack. So I have dozens and dozens of these into shush. I'm going to come out of this. Is almost as bad as the mic mechanic. Right, so now I can stuff things on there with impunity. Yeah, I remember making this. I have to say my soldering now is much better than the soldering I was capable of 40 years ago. Let's just leave it at that. But yeah, half of these things like this in the box don't actually work. So I had a little pile of, I really need to sort that out at some point, growing in a corner of the studio. And once I started reorganizing the studio the week before last, I basically looked at that pile and it finally overcame what they talk about in design circles as the threshold of indignation. In other words, it became something that I was no longer prepared to put up with, and I needed to do something about it. So yeah, I spent this afternoon soldering. Go me. Mel says, Mike Mechanic was hilarious. The push is just mildly annoying. Yeah, I get that. Using it sometimes feels like that as well. It's like, oh, where's the button that lets me do the thing that I want to do? But never mind. Yeah, if you're a masochist, the push is a great purchase for completely removing any capability of playing something complicated on the piano. but it is great fun. Compositionally, it's quite interesting, and I've come up with some interesting stuff. But to answer David's questions about how 5090 is going for you, I'm obsessed with that Spitfire Audio BBC Symphony Orchestra Discover stuff. So every bloody track I think of the 4 tracks that I've got down so far, 3 of them at some point in the creative process I've gone, this needs cellos and horns, or possibly violas and violins as well. And yeah, I was listening back to them when I was trying to make sure everything was working for tonight's podcast, and good God, it's like I never expected to be able to write stuff like that. You know, it's moved what I do in really interesting directions, and you know, why wouldn't you compose for an entire symphony orchestra? It's addictive. If I win the lottery, I can quite easily see myself upgrading from the Discover package, which is free, which is great for me, to, if not the core, which is 299, then maybe the full-on professional, which is 699 quid, which is terabytes of samples and signal data. But you know, if I go back to this is my studio PC, so these are the pieces of software that I now have for composing music. So you've got all the Arturia V collections, so there's the CS80, there's a fair lot. I mean, you can run them. Array of Emotion says, as somebody who is at least partially a professional UI designer, music software makes my head hurt. Yeah, mate, this is the early 1980s we're talking about here. The Fairlight basically cobbled together a touch screen interface on, I think it was either, if it wasn't a CGA, it was probably a Hercules graphics display, so 640 by 480. They didn't have a lot to play with in those days. Ableton again, because now I can play it with the push. So Sarah, remember this noise? It's like, hang on, I can basically be the art of noise. I mean, this is called playing in the Dudley Orchestra, and Dudley being the half of the art of noise that wasn't Trevor Horn. So I'm just playing one note. Yeah, this piece of technology shaped so many albums of the 80s. Remember that? I love the fact it's just called Yes. No. God. Good timing, Avast Antivirus. That isn't the one that I was looking at, but... So, the thing is, they haven't just emulated the sounds and given me a pretty picture. David was talking about the user interface. If I actually click on the screen, I can resize it. So you can see it was if, oh, I can't resize it. Never mind. So I can actually program sequences, I can change audio, and I can tune map it, so I can put more samples on one part of my 88 piano keyboard and a lot more on the others. I don't think I have it loaded on this anymore, but I actually sampled the starting car from Close to the Edit by The Art of Noise and dropped it back into the emulation, and it works perfectly. And it actually, I could play the whole damn thing. It's so cool. It's instant Art of Noise, but it was also used by Peter Gabriel and Kate Bush and Thomas Dolby and many others. So the Fairlight was... Oh no, I don't want to do that, so that's quite all right. The Fairlight was one of the archetypal keyboards that... I mean, when the Fairlight came out, I bought my first house for the same amount of money. That's how expensive the Fairlight was. The American version, because the Fairlight was actually an Australian guy. The American version was New England Digital Synclavier, and Artoria have got an emulation of that. And once again, there are a number of very, very familiar sounds on it. So Wendy Carlos, yeah, it's got all the main Tron sounds on it. There's a lot of Frank Zappa sounding stuff here. Frank wrote an entire album called Jazz from Hell using the Synclavier because he was convinced that none of the members of his band, and his band, it has to be pointed out, included people like Vinnie Colaiuta, who was one of the best drummers in the history of drumming, guitarists like Mike Keneally or Steve Vai. It's an insane album. It's one of my favourite Zappa albums, but it is mad. Well worth checking out. Trying to think. It's so long since I played some of these. There is... Aha! There we go. So drop a bit of chorus on that, EQ the hell out of it, and that is the sound for the beginning of Beat It. Array of Emotions says, I used to be able to play this on a recorder. I love it. When it comes to keyboards these days, controller, and then buy whatever virtual synthesizer you want. I have bucket loads of the things now, so not only do I have the Arturia collection, but on here the Native Instruments stuff. I've also got Massive X, which are both cracking synthesizers. I've got the Plogue for Sando VST plugin, which is it basically lets you use specific sampled file formats that are available throughout the web. All the Native Instrument stuff. Yep, it's a rabbit hole. There is an awful lot of software out there, and a lot of it's free. There are a lot of free synthesizers out there. One of the best ones that I like is a free emulation of the Yamaha DX7 called DXZ, which is so good that one of the DX7's most obsessive users and programmers, certain Mr. Brian Eno, actually recommends it and tweets about it and says, oh, this is good, and they've just brought out a new version. So yeah, well worth doing. I'm well aware I'm waffling. I'm also very tired, so I'm going a lot, and I'm also at the point where I'm starting to just stop talking and stare at the screen blankly for a few seconds. Has anybody see again? I can see now why people edit out pauses on YouTube videos, but if I did this, I think the YouTube release of this stream would probably only be about 15 minutes, and that's not really going to put my audience figures up. So there. Any question? Brian who? Ha ha ha, just kidding. I'll have you know. I don't know if you'd noticed. I actually have one of the can't see that because it's so light. Discover the recipes you are using and abandon them. So I splurged on a pack of these a couple of years ago when Brian's website, or the Opal Records I think it was, had another bunch made. Oh, they go for silly money, the original versions, because there are 3 different versions of the deck. This is just the latest one. The original versions go for ridiculous amounts of money. So that says you are an engineer. So if you ever get stuck, right, the next 5090 song that you write, here's a free piece of advice from Brian, culled at random from the deck of a genuine pack of Oblique Strategies cards, and the advice to get you through the block that you've got on your process is: faced with a choice, do both. And isn't that a philosophy to live by? Works for me. So with that, I've been streaming now, what? Good Lord, 90 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to retrieve my little Novation Launchpad controller and see if what I think it's going to do is actually what it's going to do, and it means I can be really glib and slick about my my winding up message this evening. He said rashly, because it's all going to go terribly wrong because it's been that sort of week. If you weren't aware, I know Mel and David are. My live stream on Thursday just didn't happen. Note to self: when you unplug an XLR feed and an XLR return, it does help to re-plug them into the mixing desk in the plugs that you took them out of and not reversing them. There I was, spent 3 hours in the studio thinking I'd blown the XLR input strip on my mixer. No, it was because I'm an idiot. So don't be idiots out there. It's still dangerous. Wear a mask. Be goddamn responsible. Stay well. Stay sane. Stay safe. And I'll see you next week.